You guys are on something that is just my absolute obsession right now.
First of all, I'll just say that we're living in a different day and age, and AI is going to play the biggest role without question, but it's all the exponential technologies.
Then it dropped to about 1,000 people.
It still, for all of AI's immediate uses, it still seems hard to imagine that big leap. How should people be using AI right now if they want to be on that path?
So understanding what's out there, what the modalities are, and what you can and should be using is critical because we are so limited as carbon life forms.
I think if we've got, say, a 30-person company, every single person needs to be trained in AI and using these chatbot, auto GPT tools and absolutely augment themselves 10, 20, 100x.
I have said to my company, okay, everybody here needs to figure out in your department, what are the tools that exist in AI and how can you immediately implement them? Like I'm just sort of dumping it on them.
Or put in social sharing links throughout it. Or say, listen, I'm in HR, give me step-by-step instructions on how to use it. And no homework coming out of these 3 days and generate all the content, all the plans. And you can, but it takes time for all of us to switch from our old habits of how we do things to new ways.
Skate to where the puck is going to be, not where the puck is. So how do you guys think about that? And you guys talk in your book about the fact that the average company used to be on the S&P 500 for like 67 years. So how do we not just get disrupted 7 minutes after we figure out how to use AI?
The asteroid changed the environment of Earth so rapidly, so dramatically, that the slow lumbering dinosaurs who didn't adapt went extinct. And it's just going to change the environment so rapidly. What do you have that's uniquely yours?
And so we're all going to be able to use this.
So this goes straight to the first and most important characteristic of an EXO, which is the massive transformative purpose. Peter talks about the emotional connection that gets created. What fundamental problem do I get excited about? And I'm just going to go after that problem.
The idea of an exponential org, what we lay out is the number one thing that a entrepreneur or a more advanced company needs to do is establish that MTP, that massive transformative purpose. And once that's established, then there's a whole slew of 10 different attributes that allow you to scale and allow you to build something. Being connected to that company's MTP, people connect in their heart and their mind to that.
This is two big challenges big companies have. They're all dedicated to one particular problem. Waze, solving traffic, or Uber, everybody should have a private driver. And it acts as the kind of the North Star, the Simon Sinek question of why do you exist, etc. The first is they typically tend not to be purpose-driven. Their brands are tilting that way more and more. And that's where we think the future will go.
So one of the underlying principles of an exponential organization, you and I talked about this when we did our early podcasts on abundance or bold or futures faster. In the early days, the growth of that product or service is deceptively slow. It's like the first digital cameras that were 0.01 megapixels. The next year was 0.02, then 0.04. You dematerialize, demonetize, and democratize. So dematerialization is we don't carry Kodak cameras or film around anymore. And when things become ones and zeros, the cost of replicating them is effectively free. And the cost of transmitting them is effectively free. But would anybody go to medical school anymore? Things are getting very much faster and better, but it's gonna change the world.
If you have the right mindset, then you don't care.
I'd like to paraphrase you again. It sounds amazing, but isn't that going to damage GDP? And you said, yes, it's going to tank GDP.
I say abundance is not about a life of luxury for everybody.
If you don't mind indulging that angle, which I know is not your natural angle, but walk me through the sort of underlying terror of possibility is different.
I say please and thank you to Alexa every morning.
One of my CTOs for one of my companies years ago, we asked him what's the purpose in life, and he goes, I want to evolve to the point that my computer is proud of me. And after researching this quite thoroughly, they found that across multiple systems like this, Craigslist, eBay, etc., the actual ratio of good to bad was something like 8,000 to 1. The problem is the amplitude of that one is obviously getting much bigger. But this has been the same story since the beginning of time. Fire can heat our house and it can burn down yours.
Let me answer your question. Period, exclamation point, big bright letters. So the dangers can simply break down into three different groups. I find that very unlikely and a ridiculous thesis. I think the more intelligent something is, honestly, the more loving and kind and pro-life it will be. I have, other than I see humanity becoming as a whole over time. If you look at the numbers, right, and we've looked at this from abundance, warfare reducing massively over time. CNN every day that's broadcasting every murder on the planet to you over and over and over again. The incredible science and technology and humanitarian acts, all of these things.
Yeah.
I don't quite know what you mean by that.
And what I mean is that societal norms organizing around the United Nations.
You can reboot your life, your health, even your career, anything you want. Join the thousands of students who have already accomplished amazing things.
But, we're coming to get your water on this planet. And so sometime in the next 18 months, 2 years, there may well be not a retrovirus released, but an AI virus that goes out and shuts down power plants or shuts down Wall Street and causes a economic hurdle. There's a great book by Mo Gadot called Scary Smart. Now, if you think about Superman, who lands in Kansas, wherever he landed, and he's picked up by the Kents, and it's a loving family, he learns good ethics and morals, and he becomes a superhero for good.
I like Neil Jacobsheim's framing, which is he goes, okay, you're worried about an AI getting more and more access to information, becoming autonomous, making its own decisions, and starting to run amok out in the world.
But I'm going to be pushing my team to integrate AI more. And that's just humans lose meaning and purpose. I can't remember if I've told it in an episode, but I employ a bunch of artists. And I once sat with one of them, and for like an hour, he was just trying to get the perfect like semicircle, and he was just doing it over and over and over and over. We'll set that aside for now, meaning and purpose. And then it's just going to find the most efficient way to get to that. And so we have to be so careful about how we define and then to the idea of it being like a child, but it's like a child that has access to nuclear capability.
I think it's... Google developed sort of large language models in 2017, 2018, and didn't release them. And then Google buys it 18 months later for $1.65 billion. Do you take the careful path, or do you take the path of least resistance?
And this is where I really get, I don't know how to think through the problem of AI, because when I heard Elon's assessment of it, which is that AI is basically a demon summoning circle, and we're summoning it like crazy despite his best efforts to get people to slow down. And I can't bring myself, yeah, but don't you feel weird even saying that out loud?
And we went from prokaryotes to eukaryotes to multicellular life forms to eventually primates and now humans. And all of us have our cell phones within meters of our body. And I didn't plant it in my brain if I could.
Is what we've seen in how we build. Now, I think of the resolution of this as a symmetry problem.
We're off to explore the universe, which I think is a much more likely scenario. That an advanced enough AI has no reason to hurt humanity.
Now we need psychedelics to process this conversation.
An S-curve is a typical exponential growth curve. They go into this exponential growth where they'd start skyrocketing and then they'd run out of capability and they'd fall off, and it made like a letter S. But while you're using relays to design and use your computers, you use those computers to create the next generation of computers, which used vacuum tubes. And then the multi-dimensional integrated circuit came.
This was the basis of Ray's observation of the law. And so we find this consistently in technology. Once you see that doubling pattern starting, it just keeps going.
He is co-founder of Singularity University with us. Brain-computer interface being high bandwidth, connecting your neocortex, 100 billion neurons in your brain, to the cloud in the early 2030s.
And we now have the data to show that this is a pervasive paradigm that will be around. The book's been out for close to 10 years now. And now you have two platforms, iTunes and Spotify, selling you abundance on a subscription model. Uber's kind of broaching the edges of that. So we see industry after industry moving to this new model.
I don't know the right way to...
How many chickens are on the planet today? Anyway, that's an aside, but we humans have a huge footprint on this planet, and we're evolving ourselves. And how do I add 20, 30 healthy years in my life? But I also want to increase my cognitive capacity. So my phone, I'll hold up my phone here, right? Or otherwise, our moms would not give birth to us. And so that is one future for brain-computer interface. And
What problem does that solve for you, though?
As we add more processing and move our brains to it, now you all have an AI and a totally new speciation type of thing. Wikipedia, for example, we have access to the world. I need a nervous system to say lift foot, scream, run for a Band-Aid. So real-time sensing, and our bodies operate like this. Our cells have receptors and they're scanning for things. And when the right thing comes by, they pick it up.
And that feels...
let me give you a
It's a
version
systemic
of this.
thing.
We're heading towards a world of 1 trillion sensors as people are walking down the street. What colors, what hem length, what hats, whatever.
And so, once we've got our Apple
life's
AR
again,
glasses, I mean, it just will be...
By the way, coming soon.
For sure, like in the next 6 months or something. Right?
No,
Have they actually said it's the glasses, though? Or
Yes.
just do they have a big announcement?
I have a party I'm going to go and grab them and try. I'm
Peter, I'm
co-hosting
going
it,
to
apparently.
duct tape myself to your shin
Okay,
to make sure
okay.
that you can't leave me behind.
Yeah.
So this gets very exciting. When it's humans in control and leveraging it to do something amazing, I love it the most. And the way that I see AI, the way that I sort of jokingly explain it, but I'm only half kidding, is that phase one is that there's going to be humans that learn how to use AI are going to just absolutely smash humans that rebel against it and don't use it. Do you really believe that?
I really believe that.
Here, and they started like doing birthday.
So the question is this the first time? Well,
Frank Drake was a scientist at NASA in the 50s, and NASA commissioned him to say, what's the probability of life out there somewhere?
critical.
And so he came up with a bunch of factors saying, if you had, what's the likelihood of similar carbon-based radio technology life forms out in the universe? And every time we learn more about the universe, how many stars there are, et cetera, turns out there's 100 times more stars that have stable planets around them than we and therefore you really end up with a Fermi paradox of, if there's intelligent life out there, why haven't we seen it?
How long would that species exist before something happened to it?
The theory I like the most is called the transcension hypothesis by a guy called John Smart, who figures we'll get to AR level capability and VR level capability.
Maybe what I'm about to say isn't true, but it seems self-evident to me that once you can attach the nervous system truly, like your own nervous system, and you can manipulate your neurochemistry, that you would create dream states.
Infinite worlds.
Yeah, that you just go inward. Why would you bother projecting out, which would take so much more energy? And so you just go in and you have these incredible experiences. That strikes me as
let's go
the
back
great
to your
filter.
question of purpose now. Maybe your purpose is to, and this we go back to the Matrix again, because without the challenge, the question is that empty, the old Twilight Zone, right? Where the guy goes to Las Vegas and he's winning all the time. And so in this episode, this guy dies and he's been a mafioso, and he goes to heaven or hell, and he shows up and they're beautiful women every place.
So manga and anime. And I was reading manga like a fiend and watching as much anime as I could. Needed to be moving towards something. It needed to add up to something.
And today, relatively, we have plentiful. We were all spending 28 hours a day in the fields just to put 3 meals on the table. We've steadily shrunk the amount of time. Society very clearly goes to 4 things that they do. And you end up looking at self-expression and the artistic realm much more than you did before, whether in whatever realm you choose.
One of the reasons we wrote this book is to help entrepreneurs and businesses understand that they can make a much bigger dent in the universe than ever before. And while it's not about making money, it's about how do you build a significant company that is transforming the planet and is making the world a better place. And so we want to get that information out there in order to succeed, because it's table stakes. And if you're running a large-scale company, if you don't use these attributes, if you're not using these, you are not going to survive the rest of this decade. What I say is there are 2 kinds of companies by the end of this decade. And so, we talk about the first step in building an EXO is having a massive transformative purpose.
And that's extremely intoxicating for me.
And that's as a richer path, much harder path, because you've got to do stuff and interact with the world, which is messy and ugly, and you put yourself at risk and you put yourself out there. But when you can make a major difference in a particular problem, like you're doing, many of our communities are making unbelievable changes and transformation in their societies, their companies, their governments, their countries. So when we wrote the original book, I did a segment on CNBC Squawk Box, and we ranked the Fortune 100 against the EXO model, we found that the top 10 most EXO friendly compared to the bottom 10, revenue growth was 3 times higher. Compound annual growth rate was 40 times higher. That as we enter a more volatile world, your ability to adapt is going to drive market value. You're chunking along making combustion engine cars, and you keep trying to do things your old way. All industries are geared towards the status quo that are creating unbelievable value in very, very little time. And if you're a legacy organization, you have to figure this out.
And there are times where I want to headbutt my own teammates.
Right, because we've lived in this as humanity. You hire the expert, you hire the guy or gal who's been in a competitor, and you bring them in, and you base what you're doing on their experience level. And so how do you build a data-driven experimentalist organization? So you get companies like Tesla and SpaceX or Amazon, where you've got, where Jeff Bezos in his very famous shareholder letter of like 2008, whatever it was, says, I'm not going to optimize for profitability.
People need to stop trusting themselves so much. And if they do recognize that they have a worldview, they are utterly convinced that it is simply a reflection of what is objectively true.
Yeah.
And so they're like, no, the way that I see things is the right way.
All of these things, which our brain really sucks at process. You give higher weight to negative information over positive information. And, there's going to be a version where you go to Jarvis, your AI, and you say, I want to put cognitive bias alert on. Tell me if I'm being biased.
And I said, you should shut it down. Because you build an organization, and over time, you spend more time trying to sustain the organization than trying to solve the problem that you set out to solve in the first place. Every role, even the CEO, is 3 years long. You're not allowed to hold any role for more than 3 years. And I think in today's world, if I had to kind of boil it down, I would say you build a company, and after 3 to 5 years, you just go, we're going to shut it down and force us to reinvent ourselves.
Don't miss this opportunity to optimize your health and truly be legendary.
When the X Prize got won and we had Spaceship One fly, we held a meeting and said, we shut it down. I said, pulled a board together, which was a $1 billion contract, which again is like, it's like, I don't know what the analogy is, but it's like you're the most successful at the top of the heap and you're about to shut down that entire revenue flow.
So the only model we found that works at all is to go to the edge of your organization and build a new capability, aiming into an adjacent area or a totally separate area, whether it's watches or retail or payments or glasses or whatever now. So they have a portfolio of teams looking at different industries at the edge in secret. And when they see something, they go into it, and that becomes the new gravity center. Every hotel room in the world has an espresso machine.
Elon and Bezos
Steve
as
Jobs.
well, Steve Jobs for sure. So we close out the book with mindset. And it's the area I'm spending most of my time. And I'll phrase it like this for everybody listening. And you asked what made them successful. I think almost everybody would say it was their mindset.
Like when you say curious, what do you mean? What stops people from tinkering or being curious?
So a curiosity mindset, especially if you're an entrepreneur, is like one of the most important things that you can incubate and have. The second mindset for me is an abundance mindset. So, the perfect example is energy. The energy is there, just not in a useful form yet. We live on a water planet, for God's sakes. And first principle thinking, I wrote about this in Future is Faster Than You Think, and that led him to go forward. Long story there.
Probably going to take pies out of that equation.
Yeah, if you're gonna live longer. It's because I think they have not yet accurately identified the way the world works, which is that if you are obsessed with being right, you will be wrong most of the time.
But the groupthink that comes inside an organization is really hard to change. We can take an organization that is old thinking, stuck in particular markets, et cetera, and you open it up using a combination of these characteristics, the mindset, the MTP, et cetera. So
we've learned how you introduce the ideas, but how do you get them to actually
Let me give you the hack. You're in the midst of developing a product.
Because nobody could figure out how to say no to it. Right?
And I will implement that immediately.
And then about 5 or 7 years ago, they started getting better on WhatsApp, et cetera, bought them instead.
So they're both useful. And what I'd like to mention, if I could, just because I want to go back to the thesis on the book. Again, our mission is to give people who are running large-scale companies who want to survive the next 10 years.
It's very different than 6 months ago.
It passed the Turing test. That was the one I didn't see coming, the signing of the, hey, let's slow down letter.
They are blown away by the success of these models.
This is where this gets really interesting. Regardless of like amount of variables, if there is a pattern to be had, it will suss it out. And given that we have some people that live to 120 and some that don't, there is a pattern.
And we're going to understand that. This decade is the decade we're going to understand that. So Fountain Life is just fountainlife.com. We have these 10,000 square foot facilities. It's a full body, 150 gigabyte upload of you. But 70% of all heart attacks have no precedent. And so we screen people first, and then every year upload you every year. And it's looking for the patterns and what medicines, and we have a large corpus of data. And the AI ability to analyze that, to say with your genome, with your microbiome, with these meds, with this, there's going to be huge learnings out of this. So right now, it's you don't have to tell it to look for anything. Health insurance pays you after you're sick. They're playing exactly the same or less.
And the insurance company is actually saying, we're going to do preventative
We're doing preventative
scanning.
testing.
Walk me through what your fantasy data would be.
I want functional data, the state of my cognitive health, my muscular health, my skin health, and so for example, right now I'm on a tear to add 10 pounds of muscle. I'm doing a small amount of testosterone replacement therapy. I mean, everything I'm doing right now in building companies, I've got what will be a $700 million venture fund aimed at age reversal and longevity. But then there's a whole slew of therapeutics that are coming down the line. You understand the amount of sleep they're getting, the amount of exercise they're getting.
It's a complete transformation in society at every level.
Did they gasp and clutch their pearls when you said
no, they kind
sell
of
heaven?
they know this is you're selling hope and you're selling eternity, etc. So I think the broader for one of the things I'm fascinated by is the idea that every institution by which we run the world completely changes now.
I know, like the movie version, like there's toys or whatever. It's
No,
I can't imagine which one
they're
it could be.
indistinguishable from each other. They'll write the name on a little sheet of paper, wrap it in 4 balls of dough. They weigh them all to make sure they're the same.
But I do like coming to understand at least people's own internal logic. So to me, another leaf is like another bit of hair.
Goes and creates a big research database of, there's a phenomena where some 2-year-old suddenly knows who they were in a past life and can walk into the house where they lived and know that this was hidden behind the painting. So there's a bunch of phenomena like this. So you start tracking this and putting this into a big spreadsheet. And if one of those meets the criteria, one of those is the same as the person that died, then I feel that's qualified enough to, I'm like, that's a pretty high bar to have one of those 4 things present in this. Distance was almost, the child that was born was almost within 4 kilometers of the person that died.
I've never had a UFO sighting or anything that I can't, with a scientific, technological mind, explain.
With you.
What's the episode 10 years?
So we're building Singularity University out. 3 years in, the model has gone from 0 to 1, and we're trying to have a baby. My wife's like upset because we're never home. So we move in, put suitcases down. I go out to get a coffee, come back, and she's standing with her hands on her hips.
Yeah, but just think of the thousands of things that you didn't notice that actually happened as well. Just those aliens to come and, take me home.
I am very much, what do they call that? Where materialist, like it's all cause and effect.
And I was freaking out because I was just like really messing with things. She's like, well, listens to me for a bit. You visualize what you want and things can happen, etc.
And again, a mindset is how I deal with opportunity or scarcity. I went into a, psychedelics not for joy or pleasure, but with shaman guiding, and I have done ayahuasca a number of times, and a connection with the universe that lets you know that love is a pervasive force and we're all connected in that regard. 100%, which is probably the most extraordinary. And I see coming out of the sea of energy 2 double helices, and they come out of the energy and they're there, and then they go back into the energy. And that was it. So
I have to ask then, so knowing how you're creating that state by manipulating certain neurons in your brain, how do you see an allergy or a scar?
And again, I I experienced it with reverence.
Everything just passes through him, and it doesn't stick, and therefore he operates in this unbelievably present form. I think that's just amazing.
One of the conversations I've been having at home recently is the human species waking up?
And an EXO is a very conscious organization. Allows them to keep a very small resource footprint and then scale very quickly. Right? TED uses community very effectively, for example.
Not as much as we should, but for our funnels, yeah.
The E is experimentation, which is lean startup thinking, constantly testing assumptions, nonstop running of experiments, and the culture of risk-taking inside the organization, constantly testing the edges and seeing what works, what doesn't work, etc. They make like 55 million fridges and ovens a year. Blows it up. Turns 80,000 people into 2,000 teams of about 40 people each. Each team decides to do whatever they want to do. Now, you go to any business school in the world and say, I want to make 55 million fridges, and they'll tell you need a ton of centralized demand forecasting, inventory management, supply chain, da-da-da-da. If if your team doesn't meet its P&L targets, you have an issue. And the way they meet their P&L targets is they work on a product, and the revenues are pooled against that product. And when they want to vote on decide what features should we go in a new fridge, they vote.
I want you to think for yourself. You understand our objectives. Go do the art thing.
But let me give you two examples that bridge the spectrum. One is if you're an employee and you join Google as a new hire. Okay, what you do is you float around as that developer or front-end person or designer or whatever your skill set is, and you float around, you meet the different teams. So that's one example of implementing this in the new hire model. They have no CEO, no reporting lines, no management teams, no middle management, no meetings of any kind. And they launch an online promotion. Everybody floods to the phone banks and helps out getting phone calls. Every employee self-selects what they want to work on. And it sounds completely like a joke, but they get more revenue per employee than Microsoft.
A particle born above the speed of light can't go slower, and below the speed of light can't exceed the speed of light.
But look, I don't shut down emotionally.
You know, Valve software is about 400 people.
When you said, oh, we're doing a case study on Valve in the book, I was like, oh, you mean the company that couldn't get Half-Life 3 or 2, whichever it was, out for 15 years? But then you said that they make more per employee.
I think you need to hire for that.
Don't go through the nightmare of trying to transform yourself, and let those slowly become the new grab. Very hard to implement into a legacy organization. So autonomy, and the final one is social technologies: Asana, Slack, Zoom, Chatter, Yammer, etc.
So what do you guys think about what Elon is doing at Twitter?
But the flip side of that is the geographic arbitrage, that I can get access to talent that I might not otherwise get to move to Santa Monica.
We have a totally distributed organization. And yes, we're less efficient than if everybody was in one place, but I can operate across multiple time zones seamlessly. People are living where they want to live. They're living with their families, et cetera, et cetera.
And hopefully the glassware becomes light enough and easy enough where it's...
And most corporations operate out of mistrust. And the entire structure is set up to mistrust you.
I don't even want to have to think about the people on my team. And the just reality is that you will get people using game theory to be like, you can hide in this company and everybody can just do whatever the hell they want.
We're reviewing our rocks, our action items, our dashboards, and everybody's got assigned specific actions, and it's not possible to hide in that regard.
So we have today very modern team and individual performance structures that allow us to handle that. Otherwise, if you take us down, you're fired. But the developers got such a sense of empowerment and autonomy from that. And wow, that was what blew MySpace away, it blew Yahoo away at the time.
AI is changing the world at an insane pace.